Okay, this is a video about levelized cost of electricity. I better turn my thing down just a little bit, I think. And maybe I'll give you the usual kind of advertising. I just had a class with my friend Afsar, and we had just one person. Did it for one person, and that's how good my marketing is these days now. I think it was really interesting too. It was wonderful. So please consider it, and you just can't get the same from watching a video. Okay, this we're going to compute LCOE, and we're going to demonstrate that we're going to do a demonstration of kind of the real LCOE and the nominal LCOE. Now I'm going to show you that demonstrate that the nominal LCOE is the NPV of the revenue divided by the NPV of the generation. Now, when we do this, this one would, the discount rate will be at a nominal rate, and the discount rate and the generation will be at a nominal rate. So I'm going to show you that the LCOE is just a weighted average. They're just a weighted average. Okay, and then we'll also show you that when we make a real LCOE, which is really reflect the production cost. Real LCOE reflects production cost. Okay, now I have to hurry up a little bit, and I might have to even stop the video. If I do, I do. And we'll show you that we do the same thing, except this time we put it a real rate. And so we get a bigger denominator because of the smaller rate, and we get a lower number, and that's the real production cost. So if somebody says, well, the price of electricity is 10 cents today, 10 euro cents, then we would say, well, what's the cost of a solar project? And that should be today's cost, which is the real cost, and not the nominal cost. Now, to get this started, let's open a file. If you have the Google Drive, then you have all these course files, there's one from Heidi. And then under Chapter 1, you go to Excel Utilities, which has the key kind of files. This damn file I've got to move. Let's get the generic macros. Okay, and when we do this, Shift Control C, here's some of our inputs. Okay, we have an inflation rate of 3%. Now let's make an inflation rate of 0. And a degradation rate of 0. Now we have we assumed kind of a Pakistani tariff that comes down and a Brazilian tariff that goes up to demonstrate this. So if we would make a graph, we could press Shift Control right arrow, press Shift F8, and select these two, Shift Control left arrow, alternate F1, and that's kind of the tariff we're starting with. Okay, so we perhaps we'll put it down here. Okay, and so one tariff goes up, the other one comes down. That's kind of the idea. Now, I did all of these. Now I'm going to go back and redo them, and when we do them, we get a simple average over time. But when we include a discount rate, the simple average is less for Pakistan, higher than Brazil, but it switches around. Then if we'd have a higher discount rate, the switch around would be much bigger because we're weighting the current ones much more bigger than the older ones. Now, when we have no inflation, the real one is similar to the nominal one, and this demonstrates that which is what we're going to do, show that this whole business is simply a weighted average. If we go even further and put a zero discount rate in, and this really does demonstrate that it's just the average. Everything is just average prices. Everything is average prices. Now, if we make a degradation on the capacity, so we make a 5% degradation, which is extreme. I hope the capacity factor doesn't go negative. That's too extreme. Let's make it 2%. Okay. 3%. I hope that's okay. So now our capacity. Oops. We better put a minimum around here, maximum, of course. This 0. Okay, so when we do that, I just press Shift Control R. Now we again have we do a simple weighting and take the present value, everything's okay. But then when we take a weighted average and reflect the fact that we're getting less generation in the out years than the early years, then it switches around, and all these have this. So the LCOE has to take account of the price pattern over time, and it has to take the account of the generation. Now, this degradation I did in a very, very simple way. Okay, so now what we're going to do is go through what perhaps you can switch off the video now, because all you need to know is these two formulas. Now what I'm going to do next is just prove these formulas to you. But, you know, I better not miss my plane, so I'm going to pause the video. Okay, I think I'm continuing this. Is that true? And I'm in another continent. I'm in Manila in the Philippines. People are wonderful. And what we will do is I'm going to just erase everything. And as long as I'm going to have to, it's been a long time. It's been a while since I worked on this, so I have to reopen this generic macros file. Oh, it's on Elvis today. And now let's put a tariff in. So for our Pakistan tariff, we said, well, from year 1 to year 11, it's 160, and then it suddenly changes. And if you do this, again, try to find the laziest way to do things. We can just shift spacebar and shift spacebar again, or press enter, and then what that will do is it will give us a 60 and 80, and then I just press Shift Control R. And for the Brazilian one, this is kind of bad. Let's take the first one and multiply that by 1 plus 3%. Now that's going to be really bad because we'll have a different formula in the second column, but what the hell. And then we press the F4 button. Okay, Shift Control R. Alright, so now if we stop here, alright, now if we have, whoops, I didn't zero out these things. Okay, if we say, well, let's just compute the simple average. So just get to average, tab, and get to the here, and since I have no numbers, I'm going to be lazy and just go down. So this is the average is higher for Brazil because we have the rates that increase. We haven't made any sort of adjustment for the generation or the present value. Now if I put NPV and we go up to our nominal discount rate, which I still have 0, that's good. And then we can click on the, and I'll press, F4, and then click on the tariffs. We can take the present value of the tariff. That's kind of, seems like a silly thing to do. And then, but then we can get that in terms of a payment. We take payment, and then we take this same rate, discount rate, nominal discount rate, F4, and then how many periods do we have? We have 30 periods, F4, and then we put a minus on the NPV. Look, it gives us exactly the same as the simple average. Now, of course, I don't know if "of course" is the right word to use here. If I would change the discount rate to 10%, then suddenly, now the Brazil has become a little bit cheaper because the present value is a little bit lower. And let's put 20%. And now Brazil is quite a bit cheaper. So we're just waiting the further out years where Pakistan was lower by a lower amount. Now, if we want to do that by hand, let's just put the nominal PV factor in. So we just put 1 divided by 1 plus the discount rate. Press F4, raise that to the power of the year. Press enter, press Shift Control R. Now to compute the weighted average, what we would have to do is just take this one and divide it by the sum. So all that, and Shift Enter, Shift Spacebar, and then Shift Control R, and you notice down here that the average is equal to 1. And that means we can compute the weighted average by taking the sum product, and this time we can cheat again. We can take the tariff and weight that by the discount factor, and if you notice the weighting factor, it's a lot lower than here. Shift Spacebar and F4, okay, and then we can go down. So this demonstrates that the LCOE without any generation adjustment is simply the weighted average, and the weighting is by the discount rate. So this gets a higher weight, and this gets almost a 0 weight when we have 20%. Now I'm going to put the discount rate back to 0, and when I put the discount rate back to 0, then the weighting is exactly the same in each period. And since the weighting is exactly the same in each period, the simple average and the weighted average are exactly the same. Now, before we get into the real analysis, let's put a number in and press F4. Let's put the capacity. Okay, Shift Control R again, and then the generation in MWH is going to just be this one times the capacity factor, but we put the capacity factor F4, and then we'll start with this one, and then let's take this generation, let's multiply that by the hours in a year. Okay, and then let's take this one and subtract the how about just put a degradation times 1 minus the degradation factor. Okay, and Shift Control R and Shift Control 1, Shift Control 1. Maybe we want less decimals, that's fine. Okay, that's our generation. Now, I think we have a 0 discount rate. Now if this starts to see why you're doing this. If I would now take the weighted average and I weight by the generation, what we can do is exactly the same thing. Take this one and divide it by the sum of the whole line. Okay, and Shift Control 1, whoops, Shift Control 1, Shift Control R, and then we can. Now, when we take the weighted average by the generation, that's just going to be the same thing. We put sum product, and we go up to the tariff, nominal tariff, and then put a comma, just like we did with the PV factor. We put the generation in, and then press the F4, and you go down. Now that if you look at this one, let me see, Brazil had a lower value, and this time it's still lower, but it's not as dramatic. I suppose if we did something really dramatic with the degradation, maybe then we'd get it closer. So yeah, in this case, Pakistan is lower with the straight average, higher with the weighted average, and this time it reverses. Okay, now we could do the same thing by simply taking the sum of all of the revenues, and I haven't computed the revenues. The revenues are simply the generation here, F4 a couple of times, multiplied by the price. And then to copy it down, why don't we press Shift down, Control D, Shift Control R. That gives us the total revenues. Now if we wanted to get the generation kind of weighted at a 0 discount rate, we could take the revenues, the sum of the revenues, and divide that by the sum of the generation. It's like taking the price in each period and doing that. Now when we do that, we get exactly the same as the oops, not if I do it like that. So you put, if you want to press the F4, I think you can put it like this, and it does it. So we have a lower amount. It's exactly the same as the weighted average if we simply sum that. Now if you sum, if we took the NPV, it would be exactly the same as the sum. We took the NPV of the revenues divided by the NPV of the generation. In fact, let's take the NPV at our 0 discount rate, okay, and take the NPV of just the generation, okay, and divide that by the NPV. I meant the revenues, and we divide that by the NPV of the generation, and that's exactly the same as our little sum calculation, okay, because of the assumption that the discount rate is equal to 0. And when I put the generation in, let's press the F4 button on that. Okay, so notice that gives you exactly the same result, and again, I did something wrong. I should have shaded this, F4, and put it in here. Okay, now what we can do now is combine the process. These ones relate to the generation, these ones relate to the NPV, and we now can combine the generation and the weighted average. Now to do that, we just simply take account of the weighting for the generation, and it works if you multiply the generation weight by the PV weight. Now when you do that, you get a Shift Control R, you get a really small number, so you have to do the same thing and divide it by the sum. Hopefully that's not all zeros. So this is giving us a 10% weight, and this is going down to a 0% weight. Now we'll do the thing where we just take and this just demonstrates that the LCOE really is a weighted average. We put some product, and we go up to the price, okay, and we put a comma, and by the way, this doesn't work if you would put the multiplication sign, and we use that combined weight we just did, and whoops, wrong one, and I shouldn't say did as F4, and we get exactly the same result, okay. And we can now, the interesting thing, maybe you're interested, maybe not, but I am, that we're going to prove that that all works with a formula. So we put the NPV in, and then put the revenues in, okay, so we take the NPV against the revenues, and close that, and divide it by the NPV, and we use the same discount rate, F4, and take the generation, okay, and this time, for once, maybe I'll be okay, and we get exactly the same result. Oops, again, what did I not do? How come I keep, I'm just going so senile on this one, okay. Okay, that, and then if we, now let's, the final one we'll do the real. Uh-oh. What was I just doing? We already did that. I am so sorry. This one we're going to do it in real terms, okay? Oh, God. Well, let's just, if we put a positive discount rate, let's put a really high discount rate, 20% in, and then we, whoops, we get the same result whether we take the weighted average. I haven't done the real one. Don't worry about the real one. The point is that this one and this one are the same. Now, the real one, that I did something else, but that so far should have given me exactly the same result. Okay. This is NPV. Well, we're going to start this one over again. Okay, and on the, now let's do everything on a real basis. So if I put 3% inflation, or if it's 20% discount rate, let's put 10%. Let's put 10% inflation. Okay, just to make it really extreme. Now then the discount rate is the real discount rate is 1 plus the nominal rate divided by 1 plus the inflation rate minus 1. We can press Shift Control P on these if you like the extra decimal point. Okay, and that comes from the generic macro. So the real rate is, let's put our inflation index here, and let's just multiply that by 1 plus the 3% inflation rate. That's not necessarily the same as the index rate, actually. Okay, and you know what I'm going to do is just put 3% inflation here first. We'll make it more radical later. The reason I'm doing that, Shift Control R, is then when we compute the Brazil one, so let's use the Pakistani one and get the real amount adjusted for inflation, and then we'll take the Brazil one and divide it by inflation. I could have used the F4 twice, but then the Brazil one, the LCOE better be 100 in real terms, no matter what discount rate we use. Okay, I haven't computed it yet. Now if we want to go through this whole process again, the first thing is we compute the discount factor, 1 plus the real discount factor, and raise that to the power of the year. Okay, this just gives us our relative value that we put on each of them, but then when you take this relative value, we've got to convert it to something that will allow us to get the weighted average. That's this. And then we've already got the generation weight, so we'll do the same thing we just did. Take the generation weight up here and multiply that by the real factor, not the nominal factor. And then we have to go through a whole kind of process again where we take this one divided by the sum of that whole line, and we get a 23% weight for the first one and a tiny weight for the other ones. And then we can get our, I almost should move this around, but our combined weighting would be the sum product. Let me see if for once I can get this right. Of the combined weight, let's press F4, and then take that against the Pakistan tariff. And then you notice that this is a I think it should be a lower number. This, I'm gonna put let's put a 9% discount rate. Okay. And I believe there's something wrong with my Brazil number. There is clearly something wrong. That should be 100, so I might have to switch it off here. Let's see what I did wrong. Did I forget to put the... Of course. Now 147 times 22. And I should have been multiplying it times 26 and 27. Excuse me. Okay. Times 26. Okay, and there. That will give us exactly our 100. Now the key thing is you can get exactly the same thing by taking the NPV, and this is very tricky. You need to take the nominal discount rate and then take the revenues. Okay, and let's put the F5 on F5, F4 on this one, and divide that by the NPV, and we'll use the real discount rate, not the nominal discount rate. We'll use the real discount rate of this one, 5.83, F4, and then take that one against the generation. Okay. And we notice the nominal rate with the nominal revenues and the real rate with the real generation, and I can press the F4 and you get exactly the same result. And how could I always do the same mistake? I'm wondering, just how stupid can I be? Okay, so, but then we get exactly the same result, and we've proven kind of that this formula, the real LCOE, for me is the real, that's the real number. That's today's prices. And shift control 7 puts a little thing around it, and that's enough of that exercise. And I'll put this exercise, let me see, oh, this is when I was looking. Oh, I don't have my website open, but I'll put it in some kind of electricity analysis. Okay, that's enough of that. I missed that train.